Despite the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah, the back and forth violence doesn't appear to be going away. The Israeli military says the militant group fired toward them in a disputed border zone on Monday. Hezbollah says these were warning shots in response to what it is calling several Israeli violations of their truce. The Israeli military says it launched attacks over the weekend on sites that had been used to smuggle weapons from Syria into Lebanon after the ceasefire agreement, raising questions about whether the reprieve is really an opportunity for Hezbollah and its allies to regroup. Let's bring in Matthew Levitt. He's the director of the Reinhardt Program on Counterterrorism and Intelligence at the Washington Institute. Matthew, thank you for being here. What does this back and forth mean for the ceasefire agreement? Do you see it holding?
Lindsay, thanks for having me. Look, we're going to see what happens with the ceasefire agreement. There's 60 days before Israel has to withdraw. But Hezbollah is supposed to have stopped attacks immediately, and the Lebanese armed forces are supposed to be coming in and not just occupying that space, but the ceasefire agreement makes it very clear there's supposed to be no space for Hezbollah. There's supposed to be efforts to confiscate weapons, to confiscate positions, and we'll have to see if that happens. Israel also made it clear to the United States that it wanted an understanding from us that if Hezbollah continued to act, if UNIFIL, the UN entity there, and the Lebanese armed forces failed to stop Hezbollah, that Israel would act in its own interests. This is the post-October 7th world for Israel. They're not waiting for anybody else to do what has to get done. I can't tell you if it's going to stay, but unlike after the last war in 2006, when UN Security Council Resolution 1701 was not enforced at all, this time around, we have a ceasefire which is also based on UN Security Council Resolution 1701, and the Israelis intend to enforce it.
In Lebanon, Hezbollah is more than just a militia. It's a political party with representation in parliament. So what is their role now? And do you think this ceasefire is an opportunity for them to regroup?
Look, if we allow them to regroup, they will regroup. The ceasefire makes it clear what the Lebanese armed forces and UNIFIL are supposed to do, and they're supposed to make it so there's no space for this group to operate as a militia and a terrorist group. What's unclear is if the other parties in Lebanon will be strong enough to be able to take on Hezbollah, to be able to assert sovereignty over the rest of the country, assert a monopoly over the use of force. Hezbollah has been, really kicked in the shins by the Israelis, but it still has thousands of operatives and thousands of small arms, and it will fight for its position in Lebanon. If it were possible to make it so that it was just a political party, just a social welfare entity, even if it was a nasty one that called for the destruction of Israel and death to America, so be it. But that's unlikely to happen just by asking Hezbollah nicely. LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, is going to have to act on the ceasefire and disarm Hezbollah. And if that doesn't happen, and it's frankly likely not to happen, then the Israelis are going to try and enforce this in their own way.
What are you watching for next?
I'm waiting to see if the Lebanese armed forces begin to deploy into those areas south of the Litani River in southern Lebanon where the Israelis are not present. Do they take the opportunity to move in there and begin to establish a presence? I'm looking to see if UNIFIL starts having more active patrols, and if UNIFIL and the Lebanese armed forces start occupying those spaces where Hezbollah has been pushed out, but where until this recent fighting, they held their own closed military zones, their own military bases. I'm looking to see if the Lebanese armed forces and UNIFIL start patrolling roads where Hezbollah has already been seen moving weapons. These are the types of things we need to see.
Matthew Levitt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.